There is a sound my knee makes now, every time I take the stairs. A small click, followed by a jolt of pain that runs from my ankle to my hip. It's not loud. Nobody else can hear it. But I hear it every single day, and every single day it reminds me of the moment my own mother looked me in the eyes and told me that my pain would teach me something. My name is Maya. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if I was patient enough, quiet enough, good enough, my mother would eventually love me the way she loved my brother. I don't believe that anymore. But I didn't always know that. This story is about the day I stopped waiting for her love, and started building my own life instead, even if it meant walking away with a secret she never wanted the world to see. Let me take you back 6 months, to the night everything cracked open. I worked as a paralegal at a small law firm downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays my bills, and most days, I like it. 2 years ago, I tore the meniscus in my right knee during a hiking trip. I ignored it for a long time because I couldn't afford to fix it. I wrapped it, iced it, took anti-inflammatories, and told myself it would heal on its own. It didn't. It got worse. By the time I finally saw a specialist, he told me plainly, without surgery, the joint would keep deteriorating, and eventually, I would need a full knee replacement in my 30s instead of my 60s. The surgery would cost $3,500 after insurance. I had saved $1,200. I needed the rest, and I needed it soon, because the damage was accelerating every month I waited. I want to be honest with you about something. I almost didn't ask my mother for help. Some small, tired part of me already knew what she would say. But another part of me, the part that still hoped, even after everything, thought, she's my mother. Surely this is different. Surely a limb, a body, a daughter's ability to walk without pain, means something to her. So on a Sunday evening, I drove to her house. My mother, Diane, lives in the same house I grew up in, a tidy brick house with a porch swing she never sits on and a garden she's proud of. My older brother, CJ, was there too, which wasn't unusual. CJ is 32, and in the last year, he had started a small landscaping business. My mother had given him $4,000 to buy equipment. I remembered that number very clearly, because I remembered how easily it had come to him. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I did my homework as a child, and I told her about my knee. I showed her the doctor's letter. I explained the surgery, the timeline, the risk of waiting. I asked, as calmly and as maturely as I could, if she would consider helping me with the remaining $2,300. She didn't even look at the letter for very long. She set it down on the table, folded her hands, and said the words I will never forget as long as I live. A limp will teach you respect. I actually laughed, at first, because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She went on to say that I had always been too soft, that pain builds character, that in her generation nobody ran to their parents for every little problem. She said CJ's business was an investment in the family's future, but my knee was just my knee. She said those words. Just my knee. As if it were a broken nail. As if I hadn't spent 2 years quietly limping through my life, hiding the pain so well that even my closest friends didn't know how bad it had gotten. I remember looking at CJ, hoping he would say something. He just stared at his phone, the way he always did when things got uncomfortable in that house. That was the moment I understood something I had spent 29 years refusing to understand. In my mother's eyes, I was never going to be equal to my brother. Not in money. Not in worry. Not in love. But what I didn't know that evening, what I could not have possibly known, was that upstairs, in the back of my mother's closet, behind a stack of old towels, sat a small wooden box. And inside that box was a secret my mother had been guarding for almost 15 years. A secret that, once I found it, would change everything about how I saw her, how I saw myself, and how our entire family would never be the same again. I left her house that night with my knee aching and my heart aching worse. I sat in my car in the driveway for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. I didn't cry, not yet. I was too stunned to cry. I just kept hearing her voice. A limp will teach you respect. I want you to remember that sentence, because everything that happens next started right there, at that kitchen table, on an ordinary Sunday evening that was supposed to be about a surgery, and became about so much more. In the weeks that followed, I told myself I would find another way. I picked up freelance transcription work on the weekends. I sold my old car and bought a cheaper one, pocketing the difference. I stopped buying coffee out, stopped ordering takeout, stopped almost everything that made my life feel a little easier. Every dollar went into an envelope labeled need that I kept in my nightstand drawer. But the pain didn't wait for my savings to catch up. Some nights it was so bad I couldn't sleep. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head, trying to calculate how many more months of freelance work it would take to close the gap. My doctor had warned me that every month I delayed increased the risk of long-term joint damage. I felt like I was racing against my own body, and losing. During this time, my relationship with my mother grew strange and distant. She would call on Sundays, ask about work, ask about the weather, and never once mention the surgery, as if the conversation at her kitchen table had simply never happened. I started to notice something I hadn't let myself notice before, how easily she talked about CJ's business, how proudly she mentioned the new equipment he'd bought, how she'd bragged to her sister that she had helped him get started. Meanwhile, my pain was something to be endured, not addressed. One Sunday, about 2 months after the kitchen table conversation, I went to her house to pick up some of my old childhood belongings she wanted out of the attic. While I was up there, digging through boxes of yearbooks and photographs, I knocked over an old suitcase, and a smaller wooden box tumbled out from behind it, spilling its contents across the attic floor. Inside were old letters, a folded legal document, and a small velvet pouch. Curious, and a little guilty, I opened the pouch. Inside was a ring. Not costly looking at first glance, but old, clearly antique, with a deep green stone set in worn gold. I recognized it immediately, though I hadn't seen it in almost 15 years. It was my grandmother's ring. My father's mother. She had died when I was 14, and I remembered, faintly but clearly, that she used to say the ring would go to me one day, because I was the one who used to sit with her for hours, listening to her stories, while CJ ran off to play outside. I unfolded the legal document with shaking hands. It was a copy of my grandmother's will, dated 3 years before she passed. In it, in plain legal language, she had specified that her wedding ring, the one described in detail, with the emerald-cut green stone, was to be given to me, her granddaughter Maya, for her kindness and her patience, which reminded me so much of myself at her age. My mother had told me, all those years ago, that the ring had been lost, misplaced somehow during the funeral, never recovered. I remembered crying about it as a teenager, feeling like I had lost a piece of my grandmother twice. It hadn't been lost. It had been hidden. For 15 years. I sat on that attic floor for a long time, the ring in one hand and the will in the other, feeling something shift inside my chest, not just sadness, but a slow, cold understanding. My mother hadn't just refused to help me with my surgery. She had taken something that was rightfully mine, something my grandmother had specifically chosen for me, and buried it in a box behind old towels for 15 years, letting me believe it was simply lost. I did some quiet research over the following days. I learned that antique jewelry with that kind of stone, in that condition, with documented provenance, could be worth significantly more than I expected, likely between $4,000 and $6,000, depending on the buyer. More than enough to cover my surgery. More than enough, in fact, to have covered it the very first day I asked. I want to be honest about the emotional storm that followed. I wasn't only angry. I was heartbroken. I kept asking myself, why would she do this? Why hide something so small to her, but so enormous to me? I even tried to imagine a version of events where there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she forgot she had it, maybe she meant to give it to me eventually. But the will was clear, the note in the box was clear, and my mother's silence, month after month while I struggled to pay for my surgery, was the clearest answer of all. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I sat with it. I let the anger settle into something quieter and steadier, something closer to resolve than rage. I began to understand that for years, I had been asking my mother for a kind of love and fairness she was either unwilling or unable to give me. And somewhere in that attic, holding my grandmother's ring, I made a decision. I was done asking. I photographed the will. I photographed the ring. I photographed the note tucked beside it, written in my grandmother's careful handwriting, addressed simply, "For Maya, when she needs it most." I put everything back exactly as I had found it, and I went home. But I was not the same person who had climbed those attic stairs an hour earlier. Something in me had gone quiet and hard, like a door closing softly instead of slamming shut. I no longer wanted my mother's help. I wanted the truth to be known, and I wanted what was mine. I spent the next 2 weeks planning carefully. I am, after all, a paralegal. I understand documents, timelines, and the quiet power of evidence laid out clearly and calmly. I was not interested in a screaming match at the kitchen table. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. I contacted an estate attorney I trusted from work and explained the situation, showing her the photographs of the will. She confirmed what I suspected: the will was a legally binding document, and the ring had been my rightful inheritance for 15 years. My mother had no legal claim to it. If I chose to, I could pursue formal legal action to reclaim it. But I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted my family to see, clearly, what kind of choice my mother had made, and I wanted to reclaim not just an object, but my own dignity. I asked my mother to return the ring, calmly, in a private conversation, giving her the chance to explain herself before anyone else knew. I sat across from her at that same kitchen table, and I told her what I had found in the attic. I watched her face change, first confusion, then a flicker of fear, then something that looked almost like relief, as if part of her had been waiting 15 years to be caught. She tried to explain. She said she had planned to sell the ring quietly to help CJ expand his business further, that she thought I would understand one day, that she didn't think I needed something so sentimental as much as CJ needed practical help. Every word she said confirmed what I already knew in my heart: this had never been about money. It had been about who she believed deserved to be taken care of, and who didn't. I didn't yell. I didn't cry, not in front of her. I simply told her that I would be taking the ring, that it was legally and rightfully mine, and that I intended to sell it myself to pay for the surgery my own body needed, the surgery she had refused to help with, while quietly planning to give away the very thing that could have paid for it twice over. She asked me not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass her in front of the family. And for the first time in my life, I said no to protecting her comfort at the expense of my own truth. At our next family gathering, a birthday dinner for my aunt, I brought the will, printed clearly, and I brought the ring, still in its velvet pouch. I didn't make a scene. I simply asked to speak for a few minutes before dessert, and I told the story honestly and calmly: my surgery, my mother's refusal, the ring I found hidden in the attic, and the years I had spent believing it was lost. The room went silent in a way I will never forget. My aunt, my grandmother's own sister, confirmed immediately that she remembered the will, that she had always wondered what happened to the ring. My mother sat frozen, her face pale, as 15 years of quiet deception unfolded in front of everyone she cared about impressing. CJ, to his credit, finally spoke up that night, telling our mother that what she had done wasn't right, no matter how she tried to frame it. It didn't undo years of feeling like the less important child, but it was something. It was, perhaps, the first time he had ever chosen me over his own comfort. I sold the ring 2 weeks later to a reputable estate jeweler, for $4,800. I used $3,500 for my surgery, and I put the rest back into my savings, the first real cushion I had built for myself in years. My surgery was successful. The recovery was hard, but for the first time in 2 years, I can climb a full flight of stairs without that sharp, familiar click of pain. My relationship with my mother has not fully healed, and I'm not sure it ever will, not in the way it might have if she had simply chosen differently that day at the kitchen table. We speak occasionally now, careful and polite, like two people who used to know each other well and no longer quite do. I've made peace with that. I no longer wait by the phone for an apology I now understand may never come. What I carry instead is something steadier. I learned that love which has to be earned through silence and self-sacrifice isn't really love at all. It's a transaction I was never going to win, because the terms were never fair to begin with. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who teach us, painfully, how to protect ourselves. My mother once told me that a limp would teach me respect. She was almost right. It didn't teach me respect for pain, or for silence, or for waiting patiently to be loved. It taught me respect for myself, enough to stop begging for what should have been freely given, and enough to walk toward the truth, even when it meant walking away from her. I don't limp anymore. Not on the stairs, and not in my life. And that, in the end, is the only inheritance that ever really mattered.